Welcome to another BTL Exclusive, where we're going to talk about the upcoming college football playoffs. Jovan, I'm stoked to go through this. First year where we have an expanded pool of teams, aka more games to bet on. How are you feeling heading into the new expanded playoffs, my man?
Feeling good. This is uncharted territory. It feels, pretty cool that we're getting the expanded playoff and finally seeing it play out. So I'm excited for the games, excited that we're getting games on these campuses too. Like the environments are going to be crazy. So excited to watch all of that and bet on it, of course.
Sure. Yeah, the more games, the merrier. They should make it like March Madness, have every single team in college football, D1, FBS playing against each other. Let's get the Hokies and TCU involved in this, huh? Why not?
Yeah, maybe we don't want to do that. Maybe we don't want to do that.
They didn't deserve it. To everybody listening, we're going to spend plenty of time here talking about the college football playoffs, giving you guys winners, going through the upcoming 4 games in the first round, talking prize pick squares, straight bets, futures, natty champs. If you've thought about it, right, or if you want to hear something about it, we're going to talk about it for this upcoming college football playoffs. Before we dive in, make sure you guys are subscribed on the YouTube over there at Bookit Sports. Make sure you have the notice turned on as well, so you know we're posting new content and new BTL exclusives. That way you're not letting these get swept under the rug, okay? Make sure you guys on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you're listening as well. If you're not watching on YouTube, we appreciate you. Make sure you're following, and feel free to leave a review as well, okay? Especially if our bets hit for this podcast. We appreciate you guys. Jovan, before we dive in, talking about our brackets and what teams we think are going to make a run in this playoffs, why don't we talk about our teams for a second? And I promise all the listeners, it's not going to be more than a minute, at least from me. And I'll even give Jovan the floor first. Talk about the Frogs, unpack the season, bitch, moan, complain, whatever you got to do. But talk about the Frogs and how the year went.
It's a weird year because it was very disappointing to start. The beginning of the season was pretty awful, I would say. They squeaked out the win against Stanford, and then it was really downhill for a couple games after that. Outside of like the FCS game, they blew a lead to UCF in a game they should have won. I said that was their season, and they blew it, and it kind of fell off from there for a couple games. They lost to a team that got shut out 2 games in a row in Houston, and then after the bye week, it started looking up. So I guess a lot of TCU fans would say the way they finished the season, getting 8 wins on the table, that was kind of impressive that Sonny Dykes was able to turn that around. But I am not one of those people because they avoided playing every single top team in the Big 12 and still only found their way out with, barely squeaking out at the back end of the top half of the teams in the Big 12. So not too excited. And they're in the New Mexico Bowl because our AD turned down every other good bowl. So they're in Rapus.
Sure. Very up and down season from the Frogs. I feel like that team could have beaten anybody on any given Saturday or lost to anybody on any given Saturday. Very up and down season for your Frogs. Still went better than how my Hokies played out the 2024 season. I think that's pretty fair to say. I mean, we're in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Does it really get worse than that? All jokes aside, I mean, come on, what are we doing? An absolute embarrassment, the Hokies this season. Everybody drank the Kool-Aid. Jovan, we're bought back in. You know how I am. I'm not taking the fucking bait unless I'm 100% confident, and they had me this year. They got me again. Kyron Drones, everybody else returning. Well, I'll tell you what, all our best players, every single one of them, just hit the portal, and they're all going to Auburn, LSU, legitimate college football programs. To all the alumni out there listening, the handful of you guys who are Virginia Tech Hokies, feel bad for you. It sucks. And unless there's a change made up top with the AD, with Babbitt, with the head coach, Brent Pry, who, by the way, if you don't know by now, he is not a head coach. You don't lose every one-possession game and call yourself a head coach. Get out of here. Go coach FCS or go be a defensive coordinator. It's an absolute joke, Jovan. I feel bad for the students. I feel bad for the fans. They work too hard. They show up day in, day out, every Saturday. For what? The Duke's Mayo Bowl, another 6-6 season? You get to celebrate beating UVA? Give me a break. Another embarrassing season for the Hokies. We deserve better.
Yeah. That was frustrating. Frustrating year for the Hokies, Krabs.
Keeping a lot in as well. We'll keep that as short and sweet as possible. I did want to reel in a couple tweets as well, Jovan. We posted before this podcast. We want to hear from some of the listeners, what teams they follow, and if we want to maybe talk about some of their seasons and how it went for them. I got a couple tweets pulled up here from the replies. We can start out with Steve D'Amico 7's Pitt Panthers, Jovan. You want to talk about their season? Very up and down as well, kind of like your TCU Frogs.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say I saw the drop off coming as sharp as I think it was, but we kind of knew there was a little luck involved in all those close games early in the season. Coming back from 3 touchdowns to beat Cincy in that game, you got the crazy close win against West Virginia in the backyard brawl. That Cal game where they really didn't even look that good and squeaked one out at the end in a low scoring battle, but they were undefeated going into that game against SMU. That was a massive showdown, and it kind of fell flat in that one, and there was no getting back up after it. I know Holstein was dealing with some injuries and all that type of stuff, but he also just looked horrible. The whole offense just looked like it never got together. So it was a very disappointing end of the season. I don't really know where they're going from there because it feels like they're kind of directionless.
Yeah, I mean, nobody expected them to do as well as they did preseason, but it was a tale of 2 seasons for the Pitt Panthers. I mean, you probably want, if you're a fan, you wish you could forget the second half, the latter half of the season. But what a start it was for the Pitt Panthers and Eli Holstein. Nobody expected that. It was fun to watch while it lasted, right? But I think we all know that was a flash in the pan. Okay. Not expecting much from that team going forward, but probably more than the Hokies. What about the LSU Tigers, Jovan? I know you're pretty anti-Tigers, but I want your thoughts. They got their QB returning next year. That's kind of big, right? Eris18 wants to know what you think about the LSU Tigers.
I just could never get a good confidence level on LSU because, I mean, first of all, they're a Brian Kelly coach team, and we've seen really all the times this year where Brian Kelly's had to be in a big spot and outcoach the other side. I mean, call it the Florida game where he played DJ Wagway in the swamp and they dominated, like the Alabama game where they got a night game in Death Valley, massive matchup, a chance to turn around the back end of your season after you just got smoked by A&M in a crazy game. You had a bye to prepare for it. Both teams did, and you got smoked by 30 points in Death Valley. It's just like I can never really back a Brian Kelly coach team. And as much as I do think like Nussmeier has some upside, and I know they've gotten them some weapons and a lot of really players around the team in the portal, I just can't get in, especially with like the trajectory of the rest of the SEC, I guess, going into next year. I just don't know where LSU kind of fits in there. It feels like they're falling behind.
Yeah, I don't know if that QB returning moves the needle, but he's better than most. And I know they've had a lot of other good pieces in the portal as well, like you're saying, Mansour Delaney, the cornerback coming over from the Hokies. So I think there's, probably a better season coming for LSU, but I don't know if it's, college football playoff-esque, right, for the upcoming year. And it was a very up and down season for the Tigers as well this past year.
Yeah. I mean, the next one, I guess, W segue from MJ, is talking about South Carolina. Just when I look at the SEC and all of these teams, whether it's South Carolina, like I'm not the biggest Nico fan for Tennessee, but he's at least young and has room to grow. DJ Lagway in Florida, I was on top of that second half of the season. All these teams seem to be trending upward. LSU, as much as I like Nussmeier and they have fantastic pieces around him, Brian Kelly kind of sticks them in the middle, and I don't think they really go anywhere.
They could play every game at home, right? LSU or the Gamecocks, they'd be in pretty good spots.
Yeah.
Look, I was impressed by Shane Beamer. That's a guy who the alumni, the students, everybody wanted his fucking heads after one bad season, after he kind of turned the program around out of nowhere. He showed this season that he might be a damn good head coach, and he might know something, or he might have learned a thing or two from Pops. I'd be pretty happy or stoked to be a fan of the Gamecocks right now, more than most teams in college football. I'd say they're trending upwards, and they got a pretty good QB in that Sellers kid. He's a stud. I'm in on them.
I wasn't the biggest Sellers fan at the start of the year. I say I'm still not exactly there, but he's definitely has been better than I thought he was going to be. So I'm kind of holding out on that one. I'll be interested to see what they do next year, but the hopes are high. They have a pretty, I don't want to say great schedule because no SEC schedule is really great, but it's probably as favorable as you can get for an SEC team. Not quite Texas level this year, but out of all the schedules I've been seeing going into next year, they have obviously they play your Hokies out of conference, but they get some good home games. They get some good home games. So I'll be interested to see how they do.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody replying, dropping their teams. They wanted us to talk about them. We got to a few. Why don't we go ahead and hop in, Jovan, and talk a little bit about this college football playoffs and some of these teams that are still alive, right, besides the bowl games. Well, Jovan, before we dive into some of the matchups and talk about some of these bets, some of these prize pick squares, I would love to hear your thoughts on the new, college football playoff selection process and the new bracket, the new expansion. You're very wise, especially with college football. What's your thought on the new expanded playoffs?
I love it. I think there definitely could be some tweaks to it, and I'm very open to hearing that. But a lot of the discourse, just with the selection, I guess, was between SMU and Alabama. I'm glad they kind of set the precedent in the old college football playoff system that 2 losses would be punished. I'm really glad that now that we have the expanded playoff, they're kind of setting the precedent that 3 losses are going to be punished. So I do love that. And I also love, I'm a big fan of a lot of underdogs. I love that they're getting their shot, especially in comparison to some of these SEC teams. Because as you know, and I think we all know, the SEC is undefeated in hypothetical games. So I'm a very, very big fan of letting the games actually happen on the field because I'm very tired of hearing of what the spread would be if 2 teams would play, because we've seen that play out numerous times in the past couple of years. Cough, cough, TCU, Michigan, who would get rolled over by a Big 12, Big 10 physical team, and it didn't happen. They got to the championship and won a game. People forget that. But I like the format. Definitely, you can tell me if you agree with this on this too, but I wouldn't mind reseeding. I like the buys. I like that conference championships mean something and get you into the tournament and get you into the bracket, but I do really not like that these teams are getting a bye outside of Oregon, like 3 teams that don't really deserve it. I would much rather see, I know Notre Dame can't get it because they're not in the conference, but like the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, even if they earned it, I guess it's kind of tough this year, but I would very much rather prefer it just get you in, kind of like the NCAA March Madness tournament works, more than auto giving them a bye.
I 100% agree. I think that's probably the one flaw of this system right now. You got teams like Arizona State and Georgia getting buys, where I think, I'm not even a Texas guy, but I think Texas is a top 4 team in the country, and they probably deserve a bye. And that's coming from me. I think you can make that same argument for a couple of those teams, a handful of those teams who are playing in the first round and don't have buys. You stack them up, at least power rankings wise. They're probably better than some of these teams getting buys, but you can make the argument for the other side as well, Jovan. It's like, well, then what's the conference championship worth then, right? Like, you got to make that worth something. These teams win their conferences. The one gripe I have with it, I don't know if it should just automatically be a buy right off the rip. A team wins their conference championship, though. Sure, it's enough to get in, like you said, but it should be more like March Madness, where it gets your foot in the door, but it doesn't get you halfway through the brackets. Arizona State, bless their hearts. I mean, what a great story this year, and I keep fading them and losing coins. So maybe I'm completely wrong about this whole thing, but does that team deserve a bye? I mean, it's been a great story. You're going to have an ESPN 30 for 30 about their alumni coach coming in, taking over the program, bringing the Sun Devils back, but does that team deserve a bye over Texas? And I'm the number 1 Texas hater there is on the planet. They never show up in big games. They're like the Yankees. No, I don't think they do. So I 100% agree, Jovan. I think they should reseed once these teams get in. And then before we move, I want your thoughts on a potential even more expanded bracket. Do you want more teams in this puppy? Or do we want to keep it as is here at 12? Is that enough for you?
I think 12 is good. I like the system with 12. Again, I think there could be some seeding tweaks, and I'm perfectly fine with that. And frankly, like talking about the buys too, I know teams obviously like they want to be rewarded and go as far as they can in the bracket, but if I'm a team, or not a team, but like just a fan of watching these games and seeing these environments play out, I would really love to see Arizona State host a bowl game or host a playoff game. I want to see Boise State host a playoff game with, I don't know, Clemson going in there, as opposed to their first game being on a neutral field, which is basically going to be the home game of whatever bigger team plays them. So this is a fan of the game. Like, I love these teams being in. I just think the fact that I'm looking at all these games in the first round, not that I'm complaining at all, because these are fantastic games, and I think I'm super excited to watch all of them, but it does kind of take away from it the fact that we're looking at home games at Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. It's like, it's awesome, and I love that they're great matchups against these couple teams, but just imagining what it would be like if we had a playoff game on site for, in Tempe or at Boise against a bigger team. It would be so much more fun, and I'm sure we'll get that in the next couple years because we'll get, different teams at different seeds, but just thinking of what it would be this year, it'd be awesome.
It's another reason to do the reseeding once all these teams get their foot in the door, right? And honestly, you kill some of the momentum from those teams getting in after crazy conference championship dubs like Arizona State and Boise, right? Those teams have all the momentum. Who's to say you give them a home game the next week, even against a better opponent, they're going to play an extra game, but you keep that momentum rolling for those programs too. So a lot of arguments could be made for the reseeding. I'm just happy we get more games overall. I would take a couple more teams. I don't think you want to make it like, 25 teams or 50 teams or like March Madness, like I was joking about before, but 16, I wouldn't mind, an extra weekend of college football. If they could somehow squeeze it out, sign me up, but probably no more than that, right? Either 12 or 16.
I mean, if you're playing in the first round, you got to win, 1, 2, 3, 4 games to win the Natty.
That's a lot of postseason football already.
Yep. A lot of postseason football. And, a lot of those teams are obviously playing conference championships as well. So it's hard to say it could go beyond that, but I like it the way it is.
All right. Well, I agree. I think they absolutely killed it overall, making this change, and we'll see how it plays out, Jovan. I think there's one thing we know about this expanded playoffs. All it's going to do is create more chaos, upsets, and history in the college football record books. Something on this sheet, one of these matchups, the exact opposite of what we all expect is going to happen in one of these games, at least, right? It's going to be something that we didn't even think of or talk about. Yeah, hopefully, honestly, because that's what college football is all about, right? That's why we like playing the new college football video game instead of Madden. Right? Crazy shit happens. Turnovers, 100-yard touchdowns. It's way more hectic. This is why we love this sport so much. And I'm excited to watch it play out, at the highest level in the playoffs here, with it being expanded. We're set. We're blessed with 4 great games, Jovan. And before we dive into these 4 great games and talk through all these matchups, why don't we take a peep at some of them? Jovan, the first game of the college football playoffs here, Friday night, under the lights up in South Bend. Get those hot chocolates ready. And I'm sure all those Mimas and Peepaws probably wish it was an early game. We got Indiana coming into town up there to play in South Bend against the Irish. Jovan, low-key, you're a Notre Dame fan. I know you root more for the Frogs now, but I want to hear your thoughts right off the rip about this game. Notre Dame laying 7.5. Indiana's 9-3 against the spread this season, but Notre Dame is 8-0 against the spread in their last 8 games.
Yeah, and just to make it perfectly clear, the whole family is Notre Dame adjacent. So I mean, I root for them in the shadows a little bit, but I'm not like a full-time Notre Dame Glazer at all. Really, I'm I'm like the rest of the world, and where I kind of expect them to fold in every scenario when it matters. Not this year, but I think this game could be pretty tough. I've been pretty steady backing them for the entirety of the second half of the season, especially against the spread, because everybody seemed to think like this was the game that Notre Dame was going to be in a trap and potentially lose. First it was Navy, then it was Army, then it was USC. There were a lot of chances where I feel like that was the general consensus. And I've been on the Notre Dame side in all of them. This one I'm a little scared about just being close, but I do think they win this game. Notre Dame I have going pretty far, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But this is an awesome game on a Friday night at Notre Dame Stadium. That's going to be fantastic. I think it's the first Friday night game in damn near 100 years that they're going to have there. You can fact check me on that. But, yeah, it's going to be as loud of an atmosphere as you can get at Notre Dame Stadium, which is not very loud, but it'll be fun. I'm most interested to see the matchup between Jeremiah Love and I guess Riley Leonard by extension, just the overall Notre Dame rushing attack against what is statistically the best run defense in college football in Indiana.
Now, that stat probably a little bit skewed based on their opponents compared to some of these others in the field, right? But we at least know they have a solid rush defense. Might not be number one, right? Like it says by the stats, but they got a good rush defense, and I'm very excited to see that matchup too. Jovan, I'll be honest. I low-key root for Notre Dame as well. I got some family, some alum who went there. I wouldn't say I'm as tapped in as you are, and I'm on the same page with you where I just expect them to fold damn near every time. I think they fold here again. I hate to say it, but I think they fold here again. I'm not saying they're losing outright, although I wouldn't be shocked if they did, but I'm all over Indiana in this spot. Let me tell you a couple reasons why. One of these two teams that nobody believes in has an absolute chance whatsoever, not even 1%, whether it's Indiana or whether it's SMU. One of those teams is not only going to cover, but they're going to win outright because this is college football. It's how it goes. All right, there's going to be madness. You give these kids a break. You give them some time to think about these matchups, these games. They run out there on the field in front of 80,000 people. Guys, they're just kids. Okay, shit happens that you don't expect even more than, in the pros. And I'll tell you right now, this Indiana team, nobody believes in them still. What else do they have to do? I don't get it. And their coach just got paid, so he's got no pressure, right? It's almost like a win-win for him at this point. Bag secured for coach. But some of those players got to earn their bags too. And I'm sure they're still looking to prove themselves. And what better team to do it against than the Irish when the lights are turned on extra bright, Jovan? Look, I think they might keep this game within, a field goal, let alone 7.5 points. I think this spread is a little bit larger than I thought it would be, but I'm canceling that out of my brain with the fact that it's Notre Dame at home. Okay, Notre Dame at home, it's almost like the Yankees at home in the playoffs. Come on. I know they haven't done anything recently. They're going to get a little bit more respect than they probably should. So although the spread looks kind of fat off the rip, it's moving in the right direction for Indiana from 8.5 to 7.5. I do think the Hoosiers keep this one within a touchdown, and I think it's for one reason and one reason only, and that's Curtis Rourke. This kid's special, and nobody's talking about him. Nobody cares about him. I've been betting on this kid since he was in the MAC at Ohio, Jovan, and I can't believe I was fading him all this season. I should have taken a step back after a game or two and said, you know what? This kid's special. He's a little bit different, and this kid can absolutely huck the football. Good things happen when he throws it. I think good things are going to happen when he throws it against Notre Dame, when the lights are turned up extra bright as well, enough to at least keep it within a touchdown. All right. Look, I hope Notre Dame advances. For you, for Goots, for all Notre Dame faithful, they deserve it. But I'll tell you right now, I think Indiana wins this game outright, and I might even have to sprinkle on it at this point. Give me the plus 7.5. Give me the plus 235. And to add another bet in this game as well, I'll take the under when the lights are extra bright in South Bend.
Extra bright. I am with you. I think it's going to be a close game. This is, again, one of the times where I'm not super confident in Notre Dame winning by a large margin. Feels like a one-score game, maybe on a field goal at the end. But I am taking – I know we talked about the maybe fraudulent a little bit Indiana run defense. I still have a lot of respect for Indiana, so I don't want to make it out like that, like I'm calling them a fraud. But they were exposed at times when Ohio State, they did their Detroit Lions, Gibbs and Montgomery approach with their two running backs, Henderson and Judkins. And Henderson actually broke off a big one, and he was pretty physical with them. Now you bring in a guy who's a pretty healthy mix of them both, and Jeremiah Love. I think he wins out. So I will be on his rushing yards in that game. And I do lean Indiana plus 7.5 with you, but I think Notre Dame wins.
Okay. All right. You like Jeremiah Love at rushing yards? You said you'll be on that, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he comes through. And I wouldn't be surprised if Notre Dame leans a little bit more on their running back in this game compared to Riley Leonard. Hand the ball off, and even if it says, Indiana's number one rush defense in the country against the run, that's a little bit of a skewed stat. They might be more like top 25, right? They're going to have a little bit of leeway there. He's going to get his on the ground. Wouldn't even be surprised if he gets triple digits. But I think they're going to try to take the ball out of Riley Leonard's hand a little bit when the lights are brightest. Probably a smart move, if you're asking me. And try to run with him too. I don't know what his rushing yards is at yet. I haven't seen that up on Prize Picks at this point, but I certainly wouldn't mind a sprinkle on Leonard rushing yards.
It was 52.5 last I put eyes on it. And the reason why I'm not necessarily off of it, because I think he can still get his and Jeremiah Love can get his, but Indiana's approach, they've been talking about it, is kind of to hit Riley Leonard hard. Not that that's going to dissuade him from running, because he's a big physical guy, and he's been very, very smart at not taking big hits this season. But they put a lot of onus on kind of being conservative as far as running quarterbacks and making sure that if there's like a pull situation or an RPO, they will be staying and not letting Riley Leonard or any running quarterback get out. So I think Jeremiah Love, especially now that he's coming back healthy in this game, which is what it seems like, is pretty key to unlock the Riley Leonard rushing when he needs to use it. Not necessarily like a massive part of the game plan with designed runs out of the gate.
Okay. All right. Maybe we'll just stick with Love rushing yards then. Jovan, I really like Indiana spread here. And like I said earlier, I might have a sprinkle on the ML TBD on that. And I like the under 51.5 in this game. First game of the college football playoffs. I'm probably legally obligated to lock in the under to get the party started here. What are your thoughts on the total?
I don't know, to be honest with you. I saw this total and immediately I thought it was a little high for what we expect from both these defenses. And I'm not confident enough to go with the over, but I'm just staring at it. And I feel like 51.5, again, like statistically the best run defense in college football. I know it's a little skewed because of their schedule, but playing Notre Dame team where like the whole narrative is if you take the ball off the ground for Notre Dame and you put it and make Riley Leonard throw it through the air, then you should be able to shut them down. I know that's not true because I've watched Notre Dame football. And on the other side, you have an offense that kind of got stuffed in a locker against the one good team that they played that everybody put eyes on in Ohio State. And they only put up 15 points in that game. And one of those was a garbage time score. 51.5. I feel like we should be seeing more 40s, which is what scares me.
Could it have something to do with the 1,000,000 points that each team has scored in their last couple of games?
Yeah, I mean, it could. It's just we know Vegas is kind of smarter than that, knowing which team, like, because Indiana played Purdue and put up 66, and Notre Dame played USC, and granted, like, two of their scores were defensive at the very end of the game. Their offense really wasn't fantastic throughout that game, I would say. So I don't know.
Worried about some points. Okay.
A little worried. I think that's good for Indiana too, because I feel like if this game soars under, that means Notre Dame's defense is stuffing them in a locker.
Good point. All right. Yeah, it's all Hoosiers for me here. We'll see how it goes. Jovan, any other squares, props, straight bets in this game before we move?
Don't think so.
Okay. Game number 1 down. Let's move. Next up, we got the Ponies on the road, Jovan, at Penn State. This game makes my brain hurt. Let me go over a couple trends here. SMU 7-3 against the spread in their last 10 games. And Penn State has some good news heading into the college football playoffs, Jovan. Drew Allard just announced his return to Penn State for his senior season. Surely that goes well as he heads into the playoffs. Jovan, I want to ask you off the rip because you're pretty tapped into SMU. All right, it's pretty close to you down there in Dallas. What are your thoughts on this team, and are they a live dog on the road against big and bad Penn State?
I like this team. And as much as it pains me to say, because SMU and TCU, we don't like each other, but this team and what they have going on, I mean, it just feels so similar to what TCU had going on 2 years ago when everybody counted them out game and game again. And then what do you know? A devastating loss in the conference championship game. Same thing happened to TCU against Kansas State. They still ended up in the playoff, and now they get their shot to do it again. And they're also hanging the same exact line as 8.5-point underdogs, which is exactly what TCU was against Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl in that game. So I get the same vibes. It's not why I am betting SMU or I think they're a live dog, but the team is balanced, dude. I was very nervous about what I saw from Kevin Jennings in that BYU game where he took over mid-game because it frankly looked like there was no hope. Preston Stone sucks. I'm glad they got him out of there. And then Kevin Jennings came in and he didn't look much better. Now we flash forward. Yeah, slow start. And it was against a BYU team that I think none of us really knew was as good as they were at that time. And ever since then, he's been absolutely lights out. And you can give the strength of schedule argument, whatever, but a lot of those people have not actually watched SMU play. Kevin Jennings has been fantastic. That defense, too, is a lot more physical than you think at almost every level. The defensive line has some dudes. Their corners have actually been really good. The secondary on the back half more so, like they can give up some explosives, but it's been a lot better than I think I would have thought. Now, their problem in that game, they just kind of got blitzed. The lights were too bright against Clemson in the first half. They came back and fought. And if it wasn't for, I don't know, that long kickoff return right before the winning field goal, not so sure they'd be staring at an 11 seed right now. So I like SMU, and I think they're live in this game. A lot of people are going to be scared off because it's a Texas team going to a whiteout up north in the weather where it's supposed to be in the mid-teens. Again, I don't think it matters because I think SMU, like unlike a lot of these other teams that are built with a lot of speed, they have the most physicality I think I've seen out of a lot of these teams, TCU included, from 2 years ago. So I think they're going to be able to use that to their advantage. So, yeah, I like SMU, and I feel the same way about SMU I think you do about the Hoosiers. I would not be shocked to see them win outright in this game.
Okay. Yeah, we both got our dogs. I'm not saying you're wrong either. I would not be shocked if SMU keeps this game within a touchdown here, sitting at 8.5-point dogs. The one thing that worries me about the Mustangs, it's their O-line. I'm a little bit worried about it, and maybe this is the most simple-minded take, but their O-line's not elite. Their O-line is okay, good. This Penn State pass rush is really good. This is the best pass rush that this SMU O-line is going to have to deal with, and I think that's going to potentially throw off Kevin Jennings a little bit. They're going to be in his grill a little bit more than they have been in recent weeks when he's been in the ACC chilling behind that O-line against these terrible defenses. Well, Penn State's pass rush, I'd say, is top 10 in college football, if not top 5. And I think, to be honest with you, Kevin Jennings might not look like the star he's been in the latter half of the season. He might be seeing ghosts a little bit here. Now, I kind of like a sneaky, nasty under in this game, although the total is rising up and it is really high. That's a crazy person play. And I don't even know if I can talk myself into taking that. But I wouldn't be surprised, like you talked about with the SMU defense being a little bit more physical than people expect. We know Penn State at times in this game is going to do the stupidest thing possible, just like Texas when we talk about them a little bit here. These teams when the lights are turned up, same with Notre Dame, they're going to make mistakes. Okay. And we have a ton of these, blue chip programs, Jovan, that are playing at home. Some of them are going to fuck up, if not all of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Mustangs take advantage of it here. But what worries me the most, man, is that O-line for SMU. Are they going to be able to hold up? And I'm looking at Kevin Jennings' rush yards at 16.5. It looks like the freest more than of all time on Prize Picks, looking at his last couple games and recency bias-wise, just watching his last couple games. The guy's been great on the ground. He's, dual threat-ish. I wouldn't say, the majority of the season he's been Lamar Jackson, but the guy can run a little bit. Last couple games, especially, he's been running the football. But I think a couple sacks are what's going to hold him back in this game and maybe throw off the SMU offense and probably help Kevin Jennings go less than that 16.5 rushing yards number. I'm looking at locking in that less than. I'm sure he breaks one or two runs, Jovan, but I think Penn State racks up a couple sacks here as well. And we know what happens to the rushing yard stat for QBs in college when that's the case. Caked.
Yeah, absolutely caked. It's the most frustrating thing maybe of all time when you take quarterback rushing yards and that happens, especially when they are a little above their line as it happens. So, yeah, I can definitely see that happening, Krabs.
What about Nick Singleton? You think he gets involved for Penn State in this game? I know SMU's rush defense has been pretty good, but Penn State's got two bruisers back there, man. You think one of those two guys thrives a little bit at times, or are you out?
Yeah, it's just very difficult with Penn State's backfield. I know really like Nick Singleton, not that he's just the pass catching guy, but he's been more of the pass catching guy than Katron Allen. Recently, I guess Katron Allen's gotten a little more involved, but they use Nick Singleton in the pass game a little more. So like if you're going to take Nick Singleton, I would probably like to include that. And it was lined super high. It always is compared to Katron Allen, but in the weather with Drew Haller at quarterback and a secondary that's going to do their best to keep everything in front of them. I think if you're going to go Nick Singleton, I think you encompass everything. It's really hard with the two-headed backfield. I've kind of resigned from doing it all season, so I don't know if I can confidently do it now.
I'd be shocked if Penn State puts this game in the hands of Drew Haller. Bless his heart, he's had a pretty darn good year. I wouldn't say elite. Pretty darn good year for the kids. Finally. Been waiting for it, right? The 5-star greatest prospect of all time that hasn't done shit. Had a pretty good year this season. I'd be shocked if they put the ball in his hands, though, in crunch time. Hand the ball to your two stud running backs against SMU. I'm not overthinking it here. I don't know which running back it's going to be. I picked out Nick Singleton. They fed him last week. I think they feed him again here. I think this is, a game where he earns his NIL. But if you're thinking to go with the second guy, I wouldn't be shocked if both guys grow up in the backfield.
I wouldn't be shocked either. I don't feel all that confident saying how the touches are going to be distributed between the two because if they just want to go the physicality route and say we're going to be better than you on the ground, which is exactly what Michigan tried to do against TCU for the entire first half, and shocker, didn't work. I wouldn't be shocked to see that approach at all. But you know what I think is going to happen, Krabs, because just like I said, whenever you're this big physical team going into play another team that's built on speed and you think you're bigger, faster, stronger than them, or at least bigger and stronger than them, you lean on the run game a little too much, and then it gets you into trouble, whether it stalls out your drives or you make a pretty crucial mistake, just like J.J. McCarthy did twice against TCU. I think the SMU defense or special teams gets on the board in this game. And that's what makes this game really, really weird.
Yeah, can I borrow that crystal ball for a little bit? Because you've already seen something.
I might need it.
Dude, if SMU returns a pick six or scoops up a fumble, a big chunky running down the field, 350-pound behemoth, finds the end zone and scores, you're literally him.
That could be the difference. Could just be a kick or punt return too, because like I said, they're built on speed and their special teams really on both sides is kind of the difference. They have, really good return guys, but they also have a veteran kicker who's been there for years, which I know the weather might not be the greatest, but maybe he's the difference just in keeping them in the game in some big moments. But yeah, defense or special teams could make this game weird. I know it's the 11 a.m. kickoff game too, probably because of the weather, but you turn on your TV or you get ready to turn on, you see SMU up 7-0 and you look, somebody took a kick back or Drew Hauer threw a pick six. Wouldn't it be something?
That'd be something. Yeah. We'll see. My goodness, a house call that early? I don't even know if that's legal. I got to check. But the Ponies, they got some speed, man. They got some speed. I got one more guy to ask you about in this game. Gronk. Tyler Warren. You think he does anything for Penn State in this game?
I mean, absolutely, dude. it's hard to really ever say anything about Tyler Warren. It's not only because he's just that good, but they utilize him in so many different ways because he's just that versatile. They use him in Wildcat. They use him up the seam. They use him on the outside. Like, if you're going again against the defense that you just think you're going to be bigger and better than at every single level, go to your guy. Especially if Drew Aller maybe struggles for a little bit. Maybe the run game isn't quite as, I don't know, flourishing as they think it's going to be early in the game. Go to your guy. So in the biggest game, I wouldn't see why they don't.
Okay. I like him to score a touchdown. ATTS. You can take it on Prize Picks as well. I think he finds pay dirt in this game. Feed your best player in the red zone. Keep it simple for Drew Aller in this game. Hand the ball off and feed Gronk in the air. Okay, that's their only chance. If they try to get too cute, if they think Drew Aller's freaking Jordan Love and he starts taking shots down the field or he turns into Anthony Richardson, they're toast. Toast. Keep it simple, James Franklin. It's the only chance you have. And don't blow your one chance you got here like you always do. Okay? Pick Penn State. Yeah, this game's probably weird, but I do think they advance. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the brackets. Okay? Got a couple more games. Let's head to the next one. Jovan, we got Clemson in this thing again. How'd they do it? How did Dabo force his way in this puppy? Well, they got their hands full at least. The college football committee did not make it easy on them. The 12th seeded Clemson Tigers are plus 11. Plus 11.5, depends on where you're looking at, on the road at Texas. Jovan, do they stand a chance? Does Clemson have a pulse?
I think they stand a chance, but do I think they get it done both in the game and against the spread? No. And I've been looking for probably every reason to get myself involved with Clemson in this game. I really don't have one that I feel confident about, especially because it's hard to fade Quinn Ewers off of a game like that in the SEC championship. He was just absolutely awful in that game. The defense kept him in it for so long, and that's definitely the biggest part of Texas's game that you can respect. Their defense plays physical, their D-line plays tough, and really the only way you consistently burn them is if you're like a super explosive defense that you can just destroy them over the top. Georgia did that a few times, obviously in that first matchup when Carson Beck had a much better second half, and at times they started to do that, like in the first drive with Gunnar Stockton in that second half, and they really weren't able to do it after that because Gunnar Stockton's terrible and Carson Beck was terrible in that game too. But I just don't see Clemson as being that. That's been their problem all year, Krabs, when I've watched them. They have the tools to be so much more explosive than they actually are. Maybe it has to be with the fact that the run game is a little inconsistent, not numbers-wise, but like Maffa's been banged up. He's not as explosive anymore on the ground. They've been going to other guys. Cade Klubnik's still been great, but like the pass catching room is so talented, but just so odd because there's never a guy with like a stuck role in any week-to-week scenario. So like I feel like Texas's defense is going to lock in this game, and they really have carried them to so many wins this year, not just one, and not just staying in the games against Georgia, but this kind of feels like another one. And Clemson plus 11 feels oddly comfortable with how Texas is coming off a game that they're just played absolutely awful in.
It certainly does. It looks like a handout. That many points with Clemson, right? A team that's been there before. Dabo, right? Plenty of playoff experience. Feels a little too easy, especially after we watched Texas play like absolute rat shit in the SEC championship. So, yes, I agree with you. It's probably Texas here on the spreads. I don't know if I'm going to get to the counter with it. I want to give you a couple trends before I dive into some plays I like. Both teams are 2-5 against the spread in their last 7 games. So, shocker, Clemson and Texas, 2 blue chip, big programs, not covering of late heading into the playoffs and not playing their best football heading into the playoffs either. The under has hit in 8 of Texas's last 9 games, and Clemson has cashed the under in 4 of their last 6 games. So both these teams have been pretty favorable towards the under in their last couple of games, and that is why I will be taking the over in this one, and I'll tell you why. A couple reasons. The total in this one is dropping a little bit, which definitely worries me. I think it's the only total that's actually moving down out of these 4 games in the first round, which I thought was kind of weird, but I've already seen it, right? You got Maffa suiting up for Clemson. This guy is banged up as heck, absolute warrior out there, but he needs surgery after the season, and he'll probably be on one leg out there running around. Are they really going to rely on him in this game and against that Texas D-line? I don't even think that would be the game plan anyways. To be honest with you, I think you got one chance, to be honest with you, to win this game, Jovan, and pull off the upset, and that's put the ball in Cade Klubnik's hands. And that might turn into Jameis Winston throwing picks left and right, or that might turn into an outright win. but it's the only chance you have. And that sounds like points to me. I think Clemson might score early. I think Cade Klubnik might strike first. And then I think Texas will settle in. You'll start to see some of their best football you've seen in weeks after an embarrassing performance in the SEC championship. Texas will pull away in this game. They'll find a way to win. Will they cover? I wouldn't be shocked if it is. It'll be late in the fourth quarter, or it'll be because Clemson just absolutely gives up at the end and they're just kind of dead after taking an early lead. That's kind of how I see this game playing out. And I think it'll be both QBs airing it out plenty. Although I love Maffa, I talked about him preseason, wanted to put him in the goat whale for us in college football. This guy's a stud, but he's entering this game on one leg. It's probably his last college game as well before he gets surgery. Like, he's going to be more of a factor in the receiving game in this one than he is in the rushing game against that Texas D-line anyways. So I think it'll be both QBs slinging it. I think we're going to see points, and I'd probably lean Texas as a side as well.
Yep, right there with you.
Okay. Speaking of Phil Maffa, I like his 7.5 receiving yards more than. Typically not a big factor in the receiving game. What are your thoughts on him getting involved, breaking one or two?
I'm definitely in for a square like this, Krabs, especially being that, I was talking about the narrative that everybody knows as well as anybody else does. He's been super banged up. He's fighting through, probably has no business playing, and he's still going to fight through and play. Texas D-line is super physical. I can only assume they're going to get a handful of really tough pressures against Cade Klubnik and make his life tough and make it a lot more difficult to throw over the top. Now, I do think he's still going to have his shots, but he's probably going to take his fair share of dump downs too. And can only assume a couple of them are probably going to go to his fallback guy, Brenning Stool, who's the tight end there, who's kind of the safety net, but it's also going to go to Maffa and the cast of the other couple running backs. So I'm very in.
Yeah, the prize picks board in this game making me think we see some points even from Clemson as well. And another guy on Clemson I wanted to talk about, Bryant Wesco, the freshman. I mean, this kid has been impressive. He scored 3 touchdowns combined in his last 3 games. And I think he gets a fourth. I think he gets a touchdown in this game as well. I think he's been the clear cut receiving threat, especially in the red zone for Clemson of late. And I think he's become Cade Klubnik's favorite receiver towards the end of the season. And I think that sticks in a big game here against Texas. I know their secondary is solid, but in a game they're probably going to be losing, and Cade Klubnik's going to be airing it out plenty, especially with the banged up Maffa. I think you're going to see Bryant Wesco, the freshman, be another pivotal part of this offense in the passing game. And I wouldn't be shocked if he finds pay dirt. I'm going to take that square on prize picks for him to find the end zone. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if he scores 2. He's been the main guy in the red zone in the receiving game for Clemson of late.
100%. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say between the 2 wide receivers that I think I would target, because I've had nightmares taking Antonio Williams this season, and just matchup wise, like Texas, usually you could find their explosives against the guy who's not the outside number 1 guy, which Antonio Williams pretty much in name is. I know they move him around a little bit, but between Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore, like I said, Cade Klubnik's going to have his shots. He's going to have to take them. One of those 2 is catching it. It's probably going to be for a touchdown. So if you have, I know Prize Picks doesn't have quite all of these up at the moment, and they're going on and off the board, but longest receptions for both of those guys. I think you're getting at least one of them.
Probably 2.
Yeah.
I'm seeing some big plays in this game. I think this will be the most exciting game of the first round. Is that a crazy take? Points.
Maybe.
Points. I'm seeing them. I gave you all those trends about all the unders for bet these teams entering this game as well. I don't think that stands up. We get a good old-fashioned shootout down there in Texas. We'll see.
Why not?
I even think Quinn Ewers gets going. I like his more than pass attempts in this game, and I like Gunnar Helms more than 4.5 receptions. I like the safety net for Quinn Ewers in this game, a guy who was a machine early on in the season, even in the middle of the season, but of late or towards the end of the season kind of fell off, didn't really find his groove. I think he hits the safety net plenty. Quinn Ewers does, and I think he takes plenty of attempts in this game. I think it's going to be the Quinn Ewers show after an embarrassing SEC championship, and you see him find his guy, his buddy Gunnar Helm, his safety net, for 5+ receptions with ease.
I could very much be down with that, because I'm right on that same game script with Quinn, because I just watching the Texas game, obviously he was terrible in the SEC championship against Georgia, and I wouldn't say he's the only reason that they struggled in that game, because you look at his numbers, he threw for 358 on 46 pass attempts, so he got his fair share of bombs, but Just when the throws needed to be made, he did not make them. A lot of that was because he was put into tough positions with, I don't know, Wisner's been their guy for the last couple weeks, and he's been fantastic, but the early down runs were not working. So they were in 2nd and long, 3rd and long quite a bit. If I'm Texas against a Clemson defense that maybe they're not Georgia's defense, but they're still pretty stout, quick stuff early, which a lot of that happens to be to Gunnar Helm. A lot of that happens to be the receivers. So get yourself in 2nd and short, which then opens the bombs. So I think Quinn has a pretty good day, as much as I hate to say it.
So do I. Clemson takes an early lead in this one. Wouldn't even be surprised if they score first. Texas pulls away in the second half. Game goes over. They might even cover. They win by double digits.
Sure.
I think it's my most confident read out of any of the games we've talked about so far, if our listeners couldn't tell already. Sure they could. Okay. You want to move on to the final game? Maybe the game I'm most excited about.
Let's move.
Let's talk about the most public sides in the first round of the college football playoffs. Jovan, I was going to bring it up right off the rip. It's the Tennessee Vols heading to Ohio State. No chance they win that game with Ryan Day as their coach, right? Looks like Tennessee, the most popular sides that I've seen in my entire life in the college football playoffs. They're getting between 75 and 85% of the bets and handle currently right now. Nobody believes in Ohio State. Nobody believes in Ryan Day. There's a clip going viral right now of him saying the goal was just to make the playoffs. I think it's hilarious that people think that matters. Look, guys, you don't think Ryan Day knows that he needs to get one here? Or he's going to be looking for a new job, applying for DoorDash with DJ Unundale, who just, committed to the NFL and thinks he has a fucking chance. They're both going to be submitting their applications to DoorDash probably in the next week or so. But Ryan Day, I still believe. I didn't hear no bell. I think he's got one more left in him. And I think this Ohio State team, if they can't do it, I know they don't have CJ Stroud anymore. They probably should have done it in the past with some of the talent they've had. But I think this team could do it with their defense. And they got plenty of pieces on offense as well that are going to be major factors in this game. But the best part of this, Jovan, for Ohio State and that defense is that they got to go against Nico, who I think is also a fraud, just like DJ, who I was talking about before. And I think you can second that. Although I think he tries to be a me guy and take over this game, and I like his more than pass attempts. We'll talk about that more in a little bit here. I think that's going to cost this Tennessee team. And instead of feeding their guy Sampson, the workhorse, they get too cute with their star Nico, and that cost them against an elite defense in Ohio State that people don't talk about enough. Most expensive defense in college football. They're going to earn their paychecks in round one. I'll tell you that much at home. I think they cover. I think they win this game by 10 plus. I wouldn't be shocked if this game goes under, and I'll be all over Tennessee's team total under as well. Maybe that's the best way to play it, but I'm all over Ohio State in this spot, Jovan. I don't believe in Tennessee, and it's literally music to my ears hearing that they're the most public side in college football playoff history. Yeah,
it's actually pretty funny. And I mean, regardless of how this game shakes out, I just don't understand. Like, people watch the same Nico that we all watch. It blows my mind sometimes how we were talking about. And I want to be clear. I think he can have a bright future. And I think the development potential is certainly there. But like so far this year, he's just wildly inconsistent, especially on his deep ball. And it's kind of, I don't know, you could say maybe that's not the biggest factor in this game because Ohio State's going to try and eliminate that to their best ability anyway. And he's got to be more effective in the short game. We haven't seen that against a better defense this year. We haven't seen that against Arkansas, like when he was terrible in that game for a majority of it. So against Ohio State in the shoe, I just have a hard time seeing it come to fruition. And do I have any really desire to bet on a Ryan Day team right now? No, but it kind of starts to feel like, I know it was different seasons, but talked about the Michigan TCU game being kind of the kick in the ass for Michigan throughout that next season. And they ended up having a fantastic season, winning the Natty and going perfect. That Ohio State loss to Michigan, that's one of the most embarrassing losses I think Ohio State's had in recent memory. So to be fading them off of that, I would not want to be that person, frankly. And I can't stand Ryan Day. I will sit to your face and tell you, as much as I've talked about Nico not being there yet, Will Howard's been in college football for years, and he's still not there. He still sucks. And I think the whole world found that out in that Michigan game. But the Ohio State defense is still the Ohio State defense. I think they win this game. Tennessee's defense also good and going to pose a challenge for Will Howard, but it's hard to lean into the most public side in college football history, damn near, in Tennessee.
Sure. Yep. It's got to be Ohio State. As much as we hate to do it, it just feels right. at this point, and hearing all the bets, seeing all the bets, everybody on earth taking Tennessee, thinking they're a live dog here is music to our ears. A couple other trends here, betting wise. Tennessee is 2-4 against the spread their last 6 games against top 25 defenses. And the under is hit in 4 of Tennessee's last 5 games against top 25 defenses. So what does that tell you? Let me go ahead and translate that for you guys. When Tennessee plays a good team, they suck. And when Tennessee plays a good team, they lose and don't score a lot of points. That's pretty much what that correlates to. And I think that's going to correlate this weekend on the road at Ohio State. Good luck playing there. That atmosphere, night game, Jovan, it is going to be bonkers. Oh my goodness. People aren't going to be able to hear for 2 weeks leaving that game. This is the most exciting thing to happen in Ohio since LeBron James went there.
Do you hear? I don't know how true this is actually going to end up being, but there's a lot of talks about the Tennessee takeover, where like apparently they've gotten a bunch of tickets, like a ridiculous amount of tickets, and it's going to be I don't know what percentage, but a lot of Tennessee fans there is what the reports are. I'll believe it when I see it, but they're planning something crazy over there. I'm interested to see just how much orange is in that stadium when we kick off.
All right. We'll see how much heart they got. I could see it right now, though. That just being absolute bullshit just to piss off Ohio State fans before the game. So we'll take a peep at the stands. We'll see if we see some orange and white stripes, right? Wouldn't be surprised if we don't see one. Okay. Yeah, Tennessee, man. God. I will say the Tennessee fans aren't really annoying. I feel like they're pretty good-hearted, and they're just happy to be here at this point. But I'm so fed up with Nico, and I think all the public bettors deserve to lose their coins backing him in Tennessee this weekend.
Yeah,
they do.
I'm with you.
Plain and simple. A couple other bets in this game that I was looking at, Jovan. Ohio State minus 7.5. I will be on that. Whatever number they end up laying, 7, 7.5, 10.5. I don't give a hoot. I'm laying it. Doesn't matter. Wanted to make that perfectly clear. A couple prize pick squares. Will Howard more than 10.5 rushing yards. Saw that was just added up there. Pretty red. And if we know anything about Will Howard, it's that in a big game, he might try to rely a little bit more on his legs, scrambling, and maybe his passing game at times, right? So that's probably a smart move for the kids. Looking at a Reddit out chart, wouldn't be surprised if he breaks, 2 or 3 runs.
Yeah, I'm definitely in on that. I've taken it a couple times this year, and it always comes very close. The line is incredibly sharp when it's Will Howard in a big game, and I've been on the right side of it, I guess, both times for the most part. But I'm in on that. I do think he's going to be hyper aware of it too. Whenever he knows he's facing a really good defensive line, he gets very active and tries his best to avoid sacks. So I know his decision-making has been overall very questionable. I guess some people have seen the last couple of weeks. I think he comes out renewed this week. So I'm very much with you.
All right. A couple more for you. I talked about Ohio State's defense earning that NIL paycheck in this game, and I think they're going to show up and show out against Nico. Let me give you one more guy who's going to earn his fat NIL paycheck for Ohio State this weekend. Keyshawn Judkins. It's time. It's time, buddy. Jovan, you actually kind of gave this bit a couple weeks ago or mid-season for Judkins when he really wasn't doing shit. And I know they got Henderson. They got plenty of options. They're going to be okay. But this is the exact game. You look at it, you say, Ryan Day, keep it simple for Will Howard, who we've seen game in, game out. When the stage is set and the lights are turned up, he throws a pick and costs your team a win. This is when you hand the ball off to your stud running back over and over and over and over again, like Marshawn Lynch said, legitimately. Give the ball to Judkins as many times as you possibly can. This is when he earns his paycheck. He's going to break one. I know that Tennessee D-line's good. Don't get me wrong. They got NFL talent on that side of the ball. I know. But I'm telling you right now, Judkins is breaking one.
Yeah, I'm in for that. I think they're going to have to switch up their run looks really throughout the entire game because just like you said, I talked about it through the beginning of the season, they, in these bigger games, definitely want to bring out different run packages because they use them like Sonic and Knuckles, Montgomery and Gibbs, RIP Montgomery, by the way. So if you're playing this physical Tennessee front, I don't think Trevion Henderson up the middle is exactly the answer throughout the entirety of this game. You're going to have to beat them on the outside, which, frankly, some of the SEC teams that have found a way to run somewhat successfully on Tennessee have done it towards the outside. And obviously a running quarterback helps with that too. So I'm in on Judkins. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up too, because it is now back on the board that Will Howard interception has reappeared.
Oh, man. I bet it has.
I mean, the whole world saw two of maybe the worst interceptions in all of college football this season in that game against Michigan. And I mean, for what it's worth, he also threw one the week before against Indiana too. That kept them in that game early.
So yeah, he's not throwing one. As nasty as that looks, he ain't throwing one.
Filthy. No. Looks filthy.
He might only throw the ball 10. It might be the triple option they pull out. They might call up Coach Ken from out there at San Jose State, Jovan, and they might say, hey, we need to craft up something here with Judkins and Henderson. We cannot let Will Howard throw the ball more than 10 times. Don't. If you don't, you have a chance. Ohio State, hand the ball off to your two stud RBs behind that big old O-line, okay? They're going to get it done for you against this fraudulent Tennessee squad. Will Howard, less than half an interception. Jovan, I wish this was up earlier so I could give it a better sell job, but my goodness, it's a great-looking prize pick square. Sign me up. Legally obligated to take that one. And then you know what? Go ahead and add Cade Klubnik more than half a pick to my cards. He hasn't been throwing them too often of late, but they have that one up right now as a normal prize pick square. And I know we're not talking about that game, but I think it's going to be the Cade Klubnik show, not the Maffa show. And he's going to have a couple good touchdown passes. But like I talked about the Jameis comp in this game, he's going to look great one drive, terrible the next. He's throwing a pick. He's going to do too much one drive, and it's going to cost him. He's throwing a pick. Love those two plays. Thank you for bringing up those interception squares. Good shit.
Yeah, I was keeping an eye on it because they've been popping back and forth for a minute now.
DJ Fitz, one more square for you here. I mentioned Nico a ton already. I might as well bring up an actual square to back him, Jovan. Nico, more than 27.5 pass attempts. I think that's because Tennessee's going to be getting their asses kicked so much, they're going to have to air it out in the entire second half of the game. It's going to be a waste of Sampson getting NFL looks or getting looks, potentially, leveling up or transferring, going somewhere useful to a team that actually could win games when it matters or isn't a fraud. It's not going to be the Sampson show, though. It's going to be the Nico show. He's a me guy. I can already see it.
I don't hate it. I do think, like, if I'm Tennessee and God forbid, they're getting smoked. I don't think it'll be that bad from the jump, but I think they have to stick to Dylan Sampson or else they're screwed for this game. So, like, I still think the pass attempts can hit because they're going to have to at some point or another. But Dylan Sampson, it's got to be similar to what Josh Jacobs was for the Packers last night, when it was just literally him for maybe the entirety of that first half or at least the first quarter. I feel like that's got to be Dylan Sampson, whether you're winning or losing at that time, to open things up for Nico. So, his squares, I know you can't really make them any higher because, like, he's out here getting 30 rushes against SEC opponents, even when they're not up by a million, but 22.5 rush attempts is no slouch number.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong, but they give him the ball 25 times a game, like you said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think they're going to feed Sampson enough. I think it's going to be Nico trying to do too much, but we'll see how that one plays out. Any other plays in this late night game on Saturday coming up?
Nothing yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we can move and groove and talk about our brackets, Jovan, and our Natty Champs. Before we get to our brackets and talk about how this is going to play out, Jovan, I would love to hear you talk about your Natty Champ winner. Who do you have winning the whole shebang?
I've got the Fighting Irish, Krabs, Riley Leonard, who I've been very, very critical on the start of the year. I know they haven't played the toughest competition really to end the year, but again, eye test. You look at him, the way he was throwing the ball, I guess even you could go back to Duke, looks nothing like what he's been doing the second half of the year, and even compared to the first half of the season. So I'm fully bought into that. I'm also fully bought into the defense is fantastic, even though they're dealing with some injuries and they have all season. The run game with Jeremiah Love is fantastic. These wide receivers, they don't even really have a guy. They just have 4 different guys and a couple different tight ends that kind of fit into this offense perfectly. So I'm buying in there. And by no means am I saying this is the toughest game, but I'm most worried about the Indiana game because it's an odd kind of interstate rivalry game to start your playoffs where you're playing at home. Because then if they were to win that game, and I know we're on different sides there, they follow up with Georgia, which I guess we can talk about that a little more on the bracket that we get to, but I have a similar level of confidence that I would be taking Notre Dame with in that game that I did. And I think you were right there with me taking Michigan when they were favored against Alabama. in that Rose Bowl game last year. So
Yeah.
we'll look forward to that, but I'm going with the Irish at plus 800.
All right. It's good value play. It's nice they're giving you that big old number compared to some of these other squads. I'll take an even worse number on a team that hasn't done shit. It's probably even worse of an angle here, but it's their year. You guys already know OHIO. It's Ohio State. Plus 475. I already locked him in at plus 450. Shit CLV, but it is what it is. I got $100 on him. Nothing crazy. Not extremely confident in this. Not a Colorado, win total under confidence level 1,000 unit play or $1,000 play, but Ohio State plus 475 to win the Natty championship. It's Ryan Day's year. He's coaching for his fucking life, Jovan. If he doesn't get it done, he's flipping burgers at Don's. Straight up. And Will Howard, to me, is good enough. That guy gets so much hate. And you know what? At times, he deserves it. Okay, he throws some bad footballs. But if the
Really
game plan is feed Judkins, who you just randomly brought in when you already have Henderson, you got 2 NFL running backs on your team. Use them, Ryan Day. If you don't, you're going to fucking lose again. Feed your 2 stud running backs. Rely on the best defense in the college football playoffs. Shocker, I'm backing the best defense, in my opinion. You can make arguments for a couple other teams, I guess. But I'm backing the best defense in the college football playoffs. Defense wins championships. Plus 475. OH.
I'm finishing that, Krabs.
Jovan, I really want to see your bracket. I think it's time. You ready?
Ready.
All right, Jovan. What are you cooking up here, man? Go over your bracket. Tell me about it.
Goats at the top, Cinderella's at the bottom. I'm with you on Ohio State in some form and fashion. It feels like a lot of people are. It's really hard to bet against them, not just against Tennessee in that game where you got a very raw prospect in Nico, a very raw quarterback in Nico going on the road against that defense. And you get the rematch against Oregon, which I was fully planning on betting on Ohio State if they were fortunate enough to not lose to Michigan and see Oregon in the Big Ten championship for a second time. But they dodged that opportunity. Now you're going to get it in the playoff. So I want to ride with them at the top there. So I'm with you. I think they get to the Natty at the bottom. Obviously, I talked about Notre Dame. I just love what they're cooking down there. If they can get past the matchup with Indiana, which, again, I think is really, really tricky, and I'm with you. They might not cover in that game, but they'll win late. You're going to get, in all likelihood, a Gunnar Stockton, Georgia, that I think a lot of people are going to overvalue because of what they saw from the first drive with Gunnar Stockton against Texas, where he looked good, but then after that, he didn't throw a ball past 5 yards. It was all quick screens, and their run game was running all over Texas, which was something new. I think Notre Dame and their run game, because if people haven't been watching Georgia for the past couple of weeks, I know they were pretty solid against Texas, but Georgia Tech ran all over them. Plus, he had a running quarterback as the factor in that. UMass ran all over them. Really, the entirety of the SEC schedule had pretty good success running the ball on them. I feel very good about them. And that look-ahead line is Notre Dame with a favorite. So I can only imagine the amount of Georgia plus money tickets that are going to come in there. So I like Notre Dame to make a run. I'm hoping it's a collision course for Ohio State and Notre Dame. That would be a Cinderella story, great matchup. But in the middle is where it gets kind of weird. Talked about SMU being potentially a live dog at SMU or at Penn State, sorry. I think they can get it done. They're the big upset that I guess I have in the brackets. And I have them facing Boise State and getting a win because I think out of all of the teams that are in the bracket and could be classified as Cinderellas, maybe you throw SMU, Arizona State, Boise State, maybe you throw Indiana in that bunch as well. I think the most fraudulent just from watching these teams is Boise State. And I love Ashton Jeanty, but realistically, like they haven't looked impressive at all the second half of the season. And I think people are kind of clinging on to what they did against Oregon, which was very impressive at the start of the year, almost winning that game on the road. They've been squeaking by a lot of these really bad Mountain West teams. And credit to them for, I guess, taking care of UNLV in some weird weather in that game at home. But other than that, they haven't looked really impressive. And if a team like SMU is going to go in there and beat them with speed, I don't think they can match up. So I think if SMU gets past Penn State, anything can happen from there. I really don't want to fade Texas in that Clemson game. That Texas-Arizona State game, I think you can flip a coin. I don't really want to fade Scatabo either, but I got some Cinderella stories at the bottom of the bracket. Didn't want to get too crazy with them at the top, but ultimately, Irish come out on top. Wouldn't that be something, Krabs?
Yeah. That wouldn't be something, and I wouldn't even be mad about it, especially if Ohio State gets there. Wouldn't that be something as well? Because, I got that ticket in my pocket. That'd be something that's probably going to happen, to be honest with you. So go ahead and lock in the Irish. Couple questions, couple thoughts. I like a lot of your sell jobs and ankles. Clearly, your hottest take here, or your biggest dog or underdog story or Cinderella, whatever the hell you want to call it, is SMU, right? Making a run, beating Penn State, which is just a crazy take that I fucking love. ACC, and then beating Boise State, right? And advancing to, the Final Four. Jovan, what's the biggest X factor for that SMU team? How are they going to get it done? What's going to surprise some people? What are you going to let them know about, the Mustangs? What's their biggest X factor in this game?
So for a lot of people that I haven't actually watched SMU football, because I can assume that's going to be a lot of people, because nobody's really that tapped in them. A lot of the concern about them is that they haven't really played games that people have paid attention to until the ACC championship. You look at a team with all the speed and a quarterback that's very mobile, you don't often think about the run game. So I would say the X factor for them during this run, especially in that first game against Penn State, is going to be Brashard Smith, who absolutely fantastic. If anybody hasn't watched him, I would recommend you Google him, like good old Coach Sig says at Indiana. He's been fantastic for them this season, and he is one of the biggest reasons why the transition to Kevin Jennings has been so smooth, because he's been giving them everything they need on the ground. So you did talk about their offensive line is a little vulnerable. They haven't been fantastic, and you're going to face a damn good D-line in Penn State in that first-round game. If he's able to counter that a little bit and have a solid game, that makes the world of difference for Kevin Jennings, and that opens up everything for that offense. And frankly, the problem with that Clemson game, they weren't feeding him enough early in the game, and he wasn't getting anything going initially. Then when they started to make the comeback, he opened it up, eventually went for 100-plus yards, I believe. So if he can be the difference, I think the sky's the limit for them, especially in that first game against Penn State. You're also probably going to have to lean on him, because it's going to be a Dallas team going up to Penn State, and it's going to be cold as shit during that game. So if he's in a box during that game, it's probably GG's. I don't think he'll be, though. So I'll be looking forward to it.
All right. Great answer. Excited to see how he impacts this game and maybe carries SMU through a couple rounds in the college football playoffs. Wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't it be?
All right. You want me to go over my bracket?
Let me see it.
All right. I got some madness in the bottom sector of my bracket too, Jovan, but I went with a different dog, different Cinderella story. And I'm going Coach Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. And no, I'm not talking about college basketball. This might be a football school now, folks. I think Cignetti's a better coach than Mike Woodson. He absolutely clears night and day, to be completely honest with you. They might be a football school after this little run they make in the college football playoffs, Jovan. Do not let Indiana get hot. It might be too late. I know you disagree. This is probably going to give you nightmares or PTSD, but I got them winning outright. That's my crazy upset. I think one of those two teams, like you talked about, and you and me both have one of them, SMU or Indiana, one of those two teams nobody believes in, is making a statement in the playoffs and going on a run. If they get through the first rounds, I think they get through the next couple rounds. And for me, I'm going with Coach Cignetti and Indiana. It's his year. They got a horseshoe up their ass as well. And they got a stud QB that nobody talks about. And they got a solid defense that nobody talks about and mentions. And I'll talk about that in a little bit in a moment. But Indiana, I got them making a run, upsetting Notre Dame, and then beating Georgia. Now, Jovan, perfect. Hearing you talk about Gunner, the QB at Georgia, everyone's going to probably overreact and think that they're okay with him at the helm. I don't get the Carson Beck hates. You're going to wish you had Carson Beck in this game. We haven't seen this dude throw the ball more than 15 yards, more than maybe once or twice, ever. And you're trusting him when the lights are brightest in the playoffs? I'll tell you what, I know he's more of a dual threat, more of a runner. You're going to see them run a little bit more, run shorter routes in the pass game for him as well. Gunner's going to use his legs more for Georgia. That's not a good thing against Indiana's defense, because like we talked about, although they might be a fraudulent number one ranked rush defense in college football, they still have a solid rush defense, and they have a solid defense overall. Might not be number one, more like top 25, but I think they're going to give Georgia problems. And if I was Coach Cignetti, I would make Gunner beat you in the air in that game, and I think that's the only chance he got to beat Georgia. And I don't know, anybody else feel like this just isn't Georgia's year? I feel like some of that magic is kind of worn off. I don't think they win a game. I think Carson Beck going down is the final nail in the coffin. So I got Indiana advancing and beating them. And then we talk about Penn State and SMU. I wouldn't be shocked if SMU covers that game, or honestly, if they pull off the upset, if Indiana doesn't do it. One of the two is, Jovan. But I got Penn State advancing. And then, like you said, Boise State's a fraud. Bless G&T's heart and bless the Smurf Turf's heart, right? Great program out there, but they're not legit. And against these other teams, they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. That defense is going to get eviscerated. Absolutely eviscerated, to be honest, by either team, whether it's Penn State or SMU. But, Penn State's due. Shelley's due. And Coach Franklin, you need to get something done here soon, buddy, or else you're about to be getting the Ryan Day treatment, plain and simple. So I got Penn State advancing. I got them playing Indiana. And unfortunately, this is where Cignetti's run ends for me. I got Penn State, another team that hasn't done shit in my lifetime, advancing to the Natty champs. And then the top part of the bracket here, Jovan, Ohio State, my Natty champ. They're advancing to beat Tennessee. I've already beaten that to a pulp. Don't need to talk about that anymore. I got Texas beating Clemson. I do think they might pull out that cover. If they do, it'll be late, not touching Clemson's spread with a 10-foot pole. That looks like a handout. And then I'll go Texas over Arizona State here. Scatterbo is unbelievable, and I cannot wait to see that kid in the NFL one day. He's a stud. He's a hard worker. He reminds me of a better Austin Eckler, to be honest with you. He's going to be great. Is it going to be enough, 1 versus 22, to beat Texas? Unfortunately, probably not. And with Texas coming in after getting their ass kicked in the SEC championship, that could be the kick in the butt that they need to finally do something. And I'm not saying win a Natty, but at least get through Clemson and Arizona State. The committee gave them a handout here. I think it's finally Texas's year to do something and get to the Final Four. And then I got them facing off against Ohio State because obviously Ohio State's beaten Oregon. Anybody who thinks differently is wrong. Not going to spend time on that. You think Oregon's going undefeated? You guys know how hard it is to go undefeated in anything in life, especially college football in 2024? Give me a fucking break. You think they're beating Ohio State twice? What are you smoking? I want some of that. No way they beat them twice. Love Dylan Gabriel. I know they have infinity NIL, Jovan, but I got a weird feeling it's Ohio State's year. Finally. And Ryan Day is coaching for his goddamn life. So I'll take them over Oregon. I'll take Ohio State over Texas. Shocker. And then I've got Ohio State beating Penn State. Two fraudulent teams that nobody believes in, that never do shit, finally facing off. And I'll take the Buckeyes to finally get it done. And Ryan Day keeps his job for as long as he wants. Hilarious.
The world might explode if that's the Final Four, Krabs. Final Four and championship game. A lot of Big Ten. But I don't want to let it go to the wayside either, because the top of that bracket I think is pretty interesting. Obviously, we have like crazy dogs in the bottom of the bracket, so stuff gets really weird down there. But a Texas-Arizona State game, if it ends up being that, I could still so see Arizona State winning that game. I just feel like their road for whoever wins that game is certainly ended, whether it's Ohio State or Oregon at the top, because I don't want to take away credit from Arizona State. I think they're awesome, super fun. Like the fact that they're such a weird team to game plan for, because obviously you have Scatterbo, but Sam Levitt just had such a weird dynamic, and I think that really helps against a defense like Texas. He's been fantastic, and nobody really wants to give Arizona State the credit. I do. I just think that is a super tough situation to be in. And again, I think they could beat Texas, and certainly if, God forbid, Clemson is there instead of Texas, I do think Arizona State can get that game. Just don't think the run's going any further than that next round game if they were to get there.
Yeah, Jovan, I find it hard to see Arizona State making a statement here, because you give them some time off, sitting on their couches, watching their next opponents, probably thinking they're going to get their asses kicked after Texas takes care of Clemson. I think a team like Arizona State needs to keep riding the momentum under their home crowd in the first round, and having them get that auto bye honestly doesn't even help them. Reseat. It's the one change we got. Reseat. I think we could both agree, and I think the listeners can agree. Yeah, Texas advancing there. Not our most confident look, and excited for that game. Should be a close one.
We'll say the neutral site locations for those second round games, I think underrated story, because some of them are pretty interesting. Like at the top, you have just a classic, usually when the bids were tied into it and it wasn't a playoff game, the Rose Bowl was Pac-12 Big Ten, and we've seen matchups like this that are super fun. That's where Oregon, Ohio State, if it were to be that, is going to be. You have, I guess, Boise State. They're going to be playing the winner of Penn State SMU in the Fiesta Bowl too, which is the site of all Boise
Brings
State.
Back good vibes.
Really, really good vibes. So, that'll be fantastic. I guess the one thing that I would definitely be concerned about I guess more so if it ends up being Indiana in that second round game against Georgia, that game's going to be the Sugar Bowl. So I can tell you how many Georgia fans are going to be packing that shit. That's going to be, there's already going to be 90% red or 100% red if it was Georgia, Indiana anyway, but I can tell you it's probably going to be 80, 90% dog red, which is crazy. So they found another way to get a pseudo home game. Georgia did, of course.
Well, you know what, Jovan? When we take a peep at some of these hypothetical lines and matchups down the line in this, playoffs, that might make the line in that game a little weirder once we talk about it. I don't want to spoil it, but I'll make sure you guys know what we're talking about when we get there. Okay, everybody listening saying, what the hell is Krabs talking about? I'll bring it full circle. Don't worry. And Jovan, aren't you going to ask me what my X factor is for Indiana?
Yeah, let's hear it. What's the X factor,
Krabs? It's easy. Thank you for asking. It's a handout question. D'Angelo Ponce. Ever heard of him?
Yep.
Absolute fucking beast. Sauce Gardner who? Yeah, go watch D'Angelo Ponce play corner for a little bit. Kid's a stud. Works his butt off. Comes from JMU with coach. This guy's going to the NFL. He's going to be a top 10 draft pick. Not just going to the NFL. What am I talking about? He's going to be a top 10 draft pick. Top 15 at least. Top 10, maybe a little bit of a pipe dream, but this kid's a stud. Okay, and if he can show up and absolutely clamp up the Irish, maybe eliminate one or two of those, weapons in the secondary, it's going to make their job one hell of a time tougher than it already is against that suspect, I guess, rush defense that we talked about that I still think is good, but maybe not as elite as it seems on paper. Yeah, D'Angelo Ponce in the fold in that secondary, Jovan, and I'll tell you what, you better hope they don't throw the ball too much with Riley Leonard because he's going to pick off somebody. He's going to make a play. He's a stud. I think he makes a statement play and maybe even forces a turnover in that game. I don't know if it's a Riley Leonard pick, maybe forces a fumble, Josh Norman punch, but this kid's going to the league and a great story coming with coach from JMU, from the gutter, going to the NFL, top 10 pick. If you haven't heard that kid or seen that kid play, you better turn on the TV and watch that game on Friday night. He's a stud.
Yeah, he's so good. So good, dude.
You can't tell I'm just all in on the Hoosiers, and I apologize because I know it's just not what you want to hear right now. So we can
know what? We're allowed to have differing opinions, Krabs. Allowed to have it. And again, I'm not in a full space of confidence that I think Notre Dame's just going to blow by them. I think the game's going to be super close, super sweaty, probably land within that touchdown number. But it's going to be great. I'll be excited to watch that one sweat it out, especially since it's the first one on that Friday night.
Yep. And I think we could both agree whoever gets through that first game is handing the dogs an L.
Yeah. I'm worried if it's Indiana. I'm a little worried if it's Indiana.
Okay. The Irish are handing them an L, though, if they get there.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. All right. W going over the brackets here. We'll see how it plays out. Shirley taking Ryan Day and Ohio State at plus 475. Works out well. They should be plus $1 billion. They should let me rate the odds on that ticket with how Ohio State's performed recently in the playoffs. Give me whatever I want. Plus 475. What a joke. That should tell you they're winning the Natty right there. All right. Before we close this puppy out, Jovan, I do want to take a peep at some of these hypothetical lines that I was talking about earlier. People thought I was crazy, but they do have made-up lines, guys, out for these hypothetical matchups in the next couple rounds. So let's take a peep at some of these. And here they are, folks. Get them while they're hot. The hypothetical lines. We can start with Oregon, Jovan. How about them only laying minus 1.5 against Ohio State in that hypothetical matchup?
A lot, especially since Ohio State is headed out towards the West Coast, too, because that's the Rose Bowl. So. Yeah,
and wait a second here. Oregon already beat Ohio State. So they're already going to win again a second time because it already happened. And they're only minus 1.5? I'm confused. That's how people's brains work. It sucks. But it is. Guys, please do not take the bait on the Ducks here in the spots. It's too easy. Okay? You guys should all know that by now. Everybody listening to this pod. It's got to be the Buckeyes. And that has to be a great sign for OH ticket holders. Might be the only good sign we got. Jovan, anything else stick out on this hypothetical lines graphic here?
Oh, man. I'll tell you, Krabs, just like I alluded to earlier, everybody freaked out last year when they saw Alabama as underdogs against Michigan. We both went on our soapbox for couple weeks leading up to that game saying, if you took the bait on Alabama, you just should not be out there hitting the button, placing wagers. And what do you know? Super sweaty game. You knew Alabama was not winning that game in overtime. They found a way to blow it. Michigan, deserved to win that game anyway. But beside the point, this line with Georgia and Notre Dame, if it ends up being that, reminds me to a T of that game. And yes, obviously I'm a little biased and looking for it because I think Notre Dame is my champion, but I think when these lines come out, anybody with two eyes are going to say, holy shit, you can get the dogs at plus money in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, which is basically a home game for them against the team that everybody thinks is frauds year in and year out and never thinks can get to the next level or fight for a championship. That was literally Alabama against the Michigan team that everybody just saw lose to TCU in the 14 playoff the year before. So yeah, them being -1.5 on a look ahead. I know there's Gunnar Stockton involved, so who really knows how Vegas is going to account for him basically. But from what we're hearing, because people watched one drive of Georgia football, Gunnar Stockton's already better than Carson Beck. So clearly something's off there. That's easily the most crazy looking line that's on these hypotheticals for the second round.
Agreed. I think a close third is probably Indiana in the state of Georgia, only getting less than a touchdown against Georgia in that game, if they end up making it. Louisiana. I'll be honest, Jovan, I think seeing +6.5 for Indiana against Georgia, even with the backup QB, to me, is also insane. So no matter whoever makes it, whether it's the Irish, whether it's Indiana, I don't know if the dogs are barking this year, man. And like you said, the whole Gunnar Stockton angle of people not knowing how good they have it with Carson Beck, I think they're going to learn pretty quickly in this game. If I was any of these defenses playing Georgia, whoever it is, stack the box, make them beat you through the air. See what the kid's got. Because we don't know what he has. We've seen him throw the ball 10 times. People are acting like he's the next Tom Brady. What are we talking about? Because he's wearing a Georgia uniform? Let's actually watch the kid play. This is the playoffs. Okay? This ain't fucking, regular season number one. A normal game. This is the playoffs. And you're expecting something good to happen from Gunnar Stockton? I don't know, man. I think either way, whether it's the Irish's favorites in that game, Jovan, or Indiana within a touchdown, not the dogs' year. Great sign for both those teams.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The bigger dogs, I wouldn't say are as interesting. It's tough with Arizona State, just looking at the lines, because they've been disrespected almost all year. Frankly, I haven't really taken a stance on too many of their sides against them, except very conveniently the games that they actually did end up losing, which was huge. But it's hard to say, at first glance, it definitely looks like they're not going to get any respect versus Texas, but it's just been the story of their season so far. Nobody really knows how to cap Arizona State because they're just such an anomaly and so different. And same goes for that potential +4.5 if it does end up being Clemson. That team is just, you throw everything out of the window. They're just different.
Agreed. Yeah, and then Boise +11.5 against Penn State or +6.5 against SMU. What are your thoughts there?
I will say I kind of expected maybe those lines to be flipped because, again, maybe I expected Arizona State to get a little more respect than they are, but they kind of get thrown out the window, like I was saying. I would have expected Boise State maybe to be a little closer to that 13.5 or a little closer to the 2 touchdown mark than they are, which was a little surprising to me at first glance because, nobody's really giving them a shot. I don't think I really am either, even if it ends up being SMU, which I'm kind of hoping. +11.5 against Penn State. I know they kind of have to go cross country to the West Coast too. That ends up being the matchup. That's probably one that I will buy into a little bit, at least with the points against Penn State. Especially, if they get game 1 against SMU, which again, big possibility, but I'm betting on SMU. I think they have a chance to get it done outright. James Franklin in 2 straight big games, and the second big game happens to be in the House of Horrors, where anybody who plays Boise State just goes to die because they have some kind of black magic in that building. I'd feel a little more confident if it was another team that also had some kind of black magic going for them in SMU. But if it's Penn State, that line's only 11.5. I can tell you what I'll probably be on.
Look short. Look short.
Give me some Genty.
I agree. right? And I talked about Penn State's pass rush. Their rushing attack for that D-line is nothing to write home about. So maybe Gene T can get his at times in that game and at least keep them within maybe single digits if they get there, or if Penn State gets there and ends up being the matchup. Yeah, that line looks a little short, and I can see myself buying into the Broncos, but I don't know if I'm buying in any other spots. Certainly not plus 6.5 against the ACC's finest, SMU Mustangs. No chance. No.
Can't.
All right. Pretty cool looking at some of these, hypotheticals, what ifs, right? The best one to me is that Ohio State, only being plus 1.5 in the rematch there. So obviously the Georgia line's looking weird as well. Maybe Boise should be getting a couple more points there in the bottom left sector too. All this tells me is that we're in for one heck of a playoffs. No matter who ends up advancing, there's going to be chaos, right? We're getting some crazy games.
100%.
All right. Well, we can go ahead and wrap it up. If anybody's still listening an hour and a half in, we appreciate you. Make sure you're subscribed on the Bookit Sports YouTube. Turn those notice on. Hit that little bell button right when you log on to the YouTube and click on our page at Bookit Sports. That way you get notified when we put out new videos. And if you're watching or listening on Spotify or Apple Music, we appreciate you guys. Thank you for following. Okay, stick with us. We've got some other pods upcoming as well, maybe talking about the NFL playoffs. We've got college basketball heating up as well, Jovan, as we get into the new year. So expect some more pods from us coming up with these big sporting events, Super Bowl as well. Excited to keep talking on these behind the lines exclusives with you. Hopefully we play our cards right and we make some coins betting the college football playoffs.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great?
Sure. If only the Hokies were in it. All right. Perfect time to wrap it up here. We'll go ahead and end it here. Appreciate you listening. Thanks for liking and subscribing. And we'll catch you on the next one.
We will.